Okay, we're back again. What is going on, guys? So, the new RTX is here. Yay. 1200 MSRP. Cough it up. Is it going to be good? Well, the reviews are out. It's around 20 to 30% faster than the previous 1080 Ti. Not surprising. I mean, there is some L2 cache performance enhancements. There's a little more raw bandwidth to deal with because it's GDR6 or whatever, opposed to the GDDR5X. Excuse me. But I don't know. The 2080 versus the 1080 Ti, they're the same price. And the new 2080 has some features. From what I've heard, the power delivery or the power amount is very, very similar to the 2080 or the 1080 Ti. I don't know. It says 215 watts here versus, you know, where's my mouse? There we go. It says 215 and 250 and 250. But I'm going to tell you right now. Let's see, Founders Edition, Virtual Link plus 30 watts. What does that mean? I'm not sure what the Virtual Link plus 30 watts is. But I can tell you right now that these these wattages are no. This card here, it's going to be very close to the Vega 64 liquid cooled. Very close. And I don't know if it was overclocked or what I saw specifically, but I did watch a couple of reviews on these cards, and the power was high, very close to the Vega 64. So I don't know what these are all about exactly, but let's take a look at some of the stuff going on here. Here's Paul's hardware. Price to performance. Take a look at Vega. Okay. Performance. 67% of this. So that means it's around 33% slower. Right? But let's just assume for a second that we could overclock it. Let's say we water blocked it, right? Because this cheaper card, you can pick it up for $500. Let's water block that, and let's say we can get around 20% performance increase. So 67 plus 20 is what? 87%, so it's still about 12% slower. 13% slower. For 500, well, figure $600 because you got to buy a water block, provided you already have a loop. I mean, if we look here, look at our memory bandwidth. 563. Now with a water block, you could probably get this to 1150. Instead of just this liquid cooled thing. It's not, trust me, it's nowhere near what a water block would be, a custom block. So you'd have to do some voltages and maybe even get it up to 1200. So your memory bandwidth is going to be on par or close to this here. Now, the L2 cache on this card is probably a little faster than Vega's, you know, and I don't know how well this is going to do DirectX 12 content yet. I don't know. I know it's a step up from the 1080 for asynchronous compute. I just don't know how much. I don't know how well the deep learning stuff can actually do for them, and I don't remember what they're called. But you know, the actual bandwidth, if you take a look, 563 versus 484. So that's what's going to give you your smooth gameplay right there, in my opinion. Okay? There's a lot of other factors that go into it as well. But me personally, I would rather have enough memory bandwidth with a slightly slower GPU than to have a super fast GPU with super high frame rates with not enough bandwidth and give you a micro stutter effect. And it may not be that noticeable, but it's noticeable to me. And that's really why I didn't like my Titan X's. It just, they didn't have the bandwidth. And I think it's going to be every bit, because they keep on increasing the GPU horsepower. I mean, look at these numbers. If we look at a 1080 Ti that's been overclocked a little bit, your pixel fill rate versus your texture fill rate. Okay, now look at the Vega. Sure, but the texture fill rate's a little higher, but the pixel fill rate's a lot less. And that's only half the story. That's at 1660. You have to add another 30% on top of this, because the boost clock is going to bring it up to 1900 or 2000, right? So these numbers are going to be much better than what they show right here. Where do they go? So this is, you know, and granted, this was a quick and dirty overclock. I could probably get 1700 out of it. You can probably get around 1720 on a water block, you know, because you're power limited, right? So you're only going to get so far. You reduce the temperature, you reduce power consumption a little bit, and you don't need quite as much voltage, so you reduce your power draw that way a little bit as well. The colder the GPU is, you know, and Vega scales really well with temperature. I don't know that the NVIDIA cards scale the same with temperature. I don't have one. I don't know. Like, it looks so good, and there's certain games that it's going to do really good with. But, damn, dude, like, the lack of memory bandwidth just really kills me. And it's worse than that, because HBM is able to do more at the simultaneously, because it has a wider bus, and it's a different technology on how the memory chips work. So the logic for them is said to be much better. I don't know, right? All I know is that Vega performed really well on my Forza Horizon 3 versus my Titan X. And my old 290Xs had the same bandwidth as my Titan X did, and they felt better. Not because they were faster, but because they had more bandwidth in percentage to their GPU horsepower. You know, they weren't quite as powerful, especially when you overclock the Titan X. You got another, what, 30%, 35% speed out of it. Probably 30%, realistically. But, you know, the memory bandwidth didn't scale on the Titan X, and I feel like it's doing the same thing here. This is actually overclocked a little bit. This must be the later version of it. I think it comes in a little slower than that by default, around 1350 or something like that. And they've boosted this up considerably for a 1080 Ti. That's getting up there for memory. Whereas there's probably a little more headroom on this yet. Not a big deal, you know, 1100, 1050. You're not going to notice a big deal difference in your frame rates, because you don't have the pixel fill rate to really take advantage of it at higher resolutions anyway. So and that's also partially where the memory bandwidth is going to help us more so on the higher resolutions to some degree. Yeah, so enough talk about that. Let's analyze a little bit here. Let's look at what what's his name had to say. Hardware Unboxed. Okay, I'm not going to actually show their video. I'll just show you slides of it. He was saying that he was really happy with the performance of this. And yes, the performance is good, but not really for the price. And look, Battlefield, right? That's a pretty good game for both companies. I think it's fairly well optimized for both. Maybe not quite as hard for the Vega as it is for the 2080 or whatnot for the NVIDIA, but it's close. So let's do something silly here. And let's take the liquid-cooled results. And, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We can take this one, too. It doesn't matter. We got 106. And take that times... How would you do that? Let's just add 20% performance boost. So now we're at 127. Now it's assuming you put a water block on it, right? So make this a $600 card. We're at 127 frames. So that's really close to the 2080 Ti performance. For about the same money as the 2080 Ti. on today's games. But if you take that into consideration for tomorrow's games, there's a very big possibility that Vega's going to do better on upcoming generations of games. It's going to hold its performance as it goes along, whereas the 1080 series may not. So, and I also think that the 2080 will probably tend to pull away from the 1080 as time goes on because of that. They've introduced technology to help with DirectX 12 with the 2080 Ti, which is part of the reason we don't get the big benefit that we were hoping for, is because part of the die is, you know, to deep learning and to RTX, the ray tracing. And part of that is also going to help with DirectX 12 asynchronous compute. So there's no question. And that's probably part of the reason that we got the performance we did. Number one, there's not any real reason for NVIDIA to release something that much faster anyway when the competition is already, you know, 30% behind you to begin with. So, with that said, if GameWorks deep learning super sampling DLSS actually works, you can probably expect another 30% on top of this. That's 1440p. Let's move ahead a little bit here. Okay, that was really loud. I apologize. Let's turn that down just a wee bit. There we go. There's the 4K results. Now keep in mind that the Vega 64 is not really a 4K card. It's a 1440p card. Or a 1080p card. And I went over that in my last video a little bit too. And also I wanted to reiterate something I didn't talk about. This was a quick and dirty overclock, and it was pushing anywhere from 1675 to 1695 depending on the benchmark. So, you know, I think it's really realistic to be able to push that considerably farther with a little bit of tweaking. I just used Wattman. I didn't even like get into it. Like, there's a lot you can do for Vega to overclock it a lot farther. So, but your power envelope is still going to be somewhat limited. And honestly, this card will already pull 400 watts or close to it, 380, you know, which with the whole card, the whole board is probably close to 400 watts. So you really don't need more power envelope. I mean, the performance is what it is. You're only going to get so much with it. As you increase voltage, the power just skyrockets. So I think 400 watts is plenty for a single card, in my opinion. And I'm happy with that. I'm glad that they allow you to do that, because that's kind of where the value segment comes in, is from the overclocking. And everybody says, oh, you can't overclock Vega, and that's bullshit. You can. And in fact, it overclocks very well. You know, by today's standards, at least. You know, NVIDIA, you're looking to get 5 to 10%. AMD, you know, you can get 15, maybe 20% with the water block. You know, so that adds a lot more value to what it actually is. So, and historically, we've shown that overclocking pays. You know, if you can get an older card to clock 30% above what it was stock, it's going to be just as good as the next generation. Sometimes better in some cases. So it just depends on what you're looking at. Proof of concept was the 7900 series from AMD. That thing was beastly, man. And so was the 290 series. Those things were amazing for their time. I can't even begin. Anyway, different topic. Let's stick to the topic here. So, the 2080 Ti, do you want it? Yes. Do you want to buy it for $1,200? Only if you have a need for it. And who has a need for it? In my opinion, someone that has a lot of money, which a lot of people do, and can just throw it away. Because realistically, this card is only going to be around a year to year and a half. It's going to be trumped by something very soon. Whether it's from NVIDIA or from AMD, doesn't really matter. It's coming, right? Especially if this doesn't sell well, then, I mean, the prices might come down on this. Who knows? Maybe after they sell out of the 1080 stock, they might drop the price on the 2080s. That's a very possibility. That's a very real possibility, right? But, you know, the 7nm stuff's coming, and when it does, it's going to drop and it's going to hit hard, because this is a 12nm process, which is essentially just the 16nm process. So it's not a real die shrink, even though it's quote unquote. Yeah, it's not. It's just a refresh. So the GPU itself is not 100% refresh. It does have new technology, and I think it can potentially be really fast. But I don't think you should really be interested in it per se, unless you have a specific use case scenario where this game that you're playing all the time needs the extra horsepower to do it. Most games don't. Most people don't have the CPU to support it. And even with this 8700K overclocked to 5 gigahertz, it's still going to be the bottleneck in a lot of situations. Not everyone, but a lot of them. So unless you're running 4K surround, if you got 3 4K displays, or at the very minimum a 4K display, I don't think you need a 2080 Ti. Let's be honest here. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't see it. I think, you know, I guess on the plus side is you could underclock it a little bit and, you know, get really good performance out of it, because if you're memory starved at max GPU load, the less GPU load you have, the better the card's going to feel, right? But if you're dropping 30 or 60% of your performance because you don't need the horsepower, then what's the point? You could have just as well saved the money and got the Vega card, right? Or the 1080 instead of the 1080 Ti, or instead of the 2080 Ti. You see where I'm going, right? Like, it really bothers me that they cut the memory bandwidth of this card when it was already starved to begin with, in my opinion. Like, the 2080 Ti should have been a 512-bit bus, and they would have had a knock out of the park, dude. People would be lining up to buy the shit, like, legit, for a long time at $1,200. Because why? Well, it would have been a big improvement. A big improvement. You know? I mean, it doesn't justify the cost. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't. But the performance would have been stellar. Like, it would have been a legitimate good card to upgrade to. And I think they really should have. But they're more interested in doing small incremental gains, and if they can get $1,200 for it, why not? You know? And then when 7 nanometer comes out, they don't have any hurdles to go over to get to where they want to be. They can drop 30% more performance and shrink the die to half the size on 7 nanometer, because they'll be able to get a little more clock speed, and they'll have more die space to do it in. You know, I mean, 7 nanometer from 16 is going to be essentially you're skipping 10 nanometer, right? So it's a big jump, and that's why I said in my last video, you know, I want, when 7 nanometer drops, I'm picking some shit up. It's gonna happen. And it's not that I need it, it's that I want it, right? So let's look at Far Cry 5. I don't even know if I need to look at all these results. You know, they're using 4K with SMAA on. Let's just think about that for a minute. If you're using a 27-inch screen at 4K, you're not going to need any anti-aliasing. I mean, at the very most, you'd maybe do a 2x because you would have a little shimmering going on, you know, depending on the game, right? But for most games, you're not even going to need it at all. Maybe if you have a 60-inch television that's, you know, 4K, then anti-aliasing maybe. But the reality is you probably aren't going to be sitting close enough to see it anyway. You see where I'm going? Like, it just doesn't. So these benchmark results, oh no, only getting 77 frames, fine. Drop off the AA, pick up another 20 to 30%. Maybe more, I don't know. Like, you know, like, there's other settings that can be changed as well that don't necessarily hurt how the game looks. Like, for example, a lot of games, I run lower fidelity shadows because I like the crisp, clean look. I don't like the blurry edges. It just doesn't look as nice to me. I'm not saying it can't look nice, but I'm just saying it doesn't, like GTA 5, you know? Like, it just doesn't. I don't care for the soft shadows in GTA 5, and I love the game, but let's take a look here. Now, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, was the 2080 performance over the 1080 Ti performance. Look at this. All the other games, the 2080 is faster. But look at this. The 1080 is faster. Wait. We got to get out of this. This is 1440p. We need to go to... Wait, what the hell was that? 1440p. Okay, there we go. 4K. Here we go. This is... Yeah, we were CPU bound. Now, that's another thing that's kind of weird in this benchmark. See, you got 22 frames per second here. 113 on the same card. Only it's a lower resolution. So you're telling me that you went up in resolution and you gained frame rate? Something's wrong there. Something's a little wacky there. But anyway, I mean, when you look at it, you know, the performance is pretty bottlenecked anyway. But look here. The 2080 Ti or the 2080 is slower than the 1080 Ti, and in most games it's not. It's faster. Well, not most, but a lot of them, right? So when I use the Titan X in this particular game, when I was cruising down the highway as fast as you can go, it didn't stutter. It straight up slowed down. It like surged as you were cruising down the road. And it's because they have flags in place or settings in place to not let the game stutter. They actually slow the motion of the game down so that it doesn't stutter. So I'm assuming that this might be a telltale of the same sort of performance going on there. You're getting way more frame rates, right? Because your frames at 4K with the Titan X would have been, you know, way down here, you know, 32 or less, right? So you have all this extra performance and not a whole lot of extra bandwidth. And man, I would love to see 20% on top of that Vega. What does that give us? 61 times 1.2, 73. So that brings us above the 1080. And this is on a game that is not optimized properly for Vega to have high frame rates. There's some other things going on here too, like it actually looks like Vega looks better visually in Grand Theft Auto. I don't know why, but it does. And I think part of it could be the anti-aliasing going on. It's almost like when you play with Vega, you don't even need anti-aliasing. But when you play, or I should say AMD, right? Not just Vega. But when you play with NVIDIA, man, if you don't have anti-aliasing on, it looks horrible. The jaggies are everywhere. So I don't know if for whatever reason, I don't even understand it. It just doesn't make sense why a developer of the game or the drivers would do such weird things like anisotropic filtering, the filtering on the ground on the road. How far away does it look clean and crisp and clear? The Vegas are farther. You know, like it looks like it. It looks like it's more defined. I don't know if that's bullshit or not, but it just looks that way and it feels that way. I don't know. It's a really weird game. And I agree with Steve in that point. You know, he only benchmarked it because he wanted to avoid people yelling at him because it wasn't in the list. It's an old game, you know? Like, it's fucking, what do you call them? Rockstar. They don't give two shits about the game. They care about money. I mean, that's been apparent over the years many a time and time again. So, whatever. Let's look. Hitman. This is supposed to be a DirectX 12 title. I don't really know. I've never really played it. Vega does good here. Just out of curiosity, I'm just looking into the future. I'm gonna do this again here for you guys. I didn't do it on screen last time, but you get the point anyway. So 135, yeah, times the 1.2. That's 162. Do you see that? Did you see that? Oh shit! Bring it back. All windows. Really? Okay. Holy shit. Yeah. So that's a 1080 Ti doing 152. Now that's assuming that the 20% overclock that I was getting 17.8. without the water block, right? That's just a stock AIO on there, and it's not really optimized at all. That's just a quick and dirty overclock, and I'm pretty sure that I can get an extra 2% out of it, or 2.2%. So I don't know which 1080 Ti they used. They could have used a Founders Edition, but they didn't state that. So I'm assuming that this is a fairly high clocked one. You know, I'm sure they're not using the very first iteration of it, is my point. So overclocking it, you're only going to get a little bit more. So what does that tell you? That Vega liquid cooled on a DirectX 12 title overclocked with the 1080 Ti overclocked are going to be very, very similar in 1440p performance. So let's go on to 4K here. And let's take a look. Now, Vega's got the memory bandwidth over the 1080 Ti, okay? But the 1080 Ti has the clock speed advantage when the shader performance and more importantly, the pixel performance. The pixel fill rate is going to be better for higher resolutions on the 1080 Ti over the Vega. So Vega shouldn't do as well on 4K as it does 1440p in comparison to the 1080 Ti. Okay, I'll show you again what I'm talking about. You have the texture fill rate is high compared to the pixel fill rate for Vega. Okay, so that's going to help at lower to mid resolutions versus the higher resolutions. So let's do this again. Let's take this. What is it, 85 times the 1.2 brings it to 102. So yeah, we actually fell off a little bit, right? And also to keep in mind that this is with SMAA on, right? Vega doesn't do anti-aliasing as well as NVIDIA. For whatever reason, there's probably some fucking secret sauce, some smoke and mirror going on there that NVIDIA's got going on. It's cutting a corner somewhere to make the performance better at the cost of a little bit of quality that you probably won't notice, right? That's the whole idea. It's all about optimization. And there are some optimization effects you can do for Vega as well. So anyway, the point is, at 4K, we were at 1440p, we were above the 1080 Ti by a considerable margin. Now we're a couple frames under it. And that's before we overclocked the 1080 Ti. Just, you know, like before. Was it 160? Let's see. Yeah, 162. So it's 10 frames over versus a couple frames under. And the next one. So yeah. Let's look at the 1080 then. No. Which one was it? The 2080. Yeah, look at that. How does it do here? Okay, interesting. It's actually worse performance than the 1080 Ti, which makes me really question how much asynchronous compute, and who knows, maybe it's just not optimized for the asynchronous part of it yet for this game, right? That's very possible, and that's maybe why we're not seeing the benefit here. And I guess that stands to reason. Look at how close the frame rates are. Hold on. Let's go to 4K again. Okay, so at 4K, we're getting the 25%, right? But there's some optimization here that could be done. The 2080 could be faster. And I'm assuming that the 2080, you know, I meant the Ti. But I'm assuming the 2080 could be a little faster here as well. So I can't be, because it's DirectX 12. You know, if we go back to GTA 5, it's not DirectX 12 anymore. This is DirectX 11. So this performance cap could be a completely different reason than the Hitman performance cap, right? Because you're using asynchronous compute to get your performance here. So it may not be a strictly memory bandwidth limitation here, right? But I would assume that's why you're seeing the closer gap, is because the 1080 Ti, I'm sure that is getting close to the memory bandwidth limitation here. Because it's got the pixel fill rate, and it's, you know, like it's got the horsepower on the GPU. And I tell you, man, it sucks. It really does. They have the chance to make something so much better by just adding a few extra memory bandwidth. Like, instead of a 352-bit bus, they could have done a 384 like they did in the Titan. And I showed you in the last video how the Titan X did way better at 8K than the 1080 Ti. Like, a lot better. Like, 25% better. That's stupid. You should never see that kind of a difference. So, I mean, yeah, when you hit a memory bottleneck, it's worse than what you would initially think, because once memory gets overloaded, it actually slows down. You actually lose performance. So it's better to keep the memory over the performance cap so that you are free-flowing all the time. You don't have the stutters and the interrupts, because once you get an interrupt, it causes another interrupt, and then that causes more interrupts, and so on and so forth, to the point where you'll start to have a really bad performing game. And the thing is, you have such high frame rates now that you don't always notice it in the charts, right? Like, it's margin of error stuff, because you have other things in the system, like DirectX 11 stopping your API from getting through. So there's other things in the equation that are helping to mask any performance anomalies in the memory starved situation, right? So, and I think that's why, that's my analysis anyway, right? That's my own judgment, but I think that's why the Vega feels better to me and plays better in certain scenarios. And yeah, I'm going with that. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert, right? So here we have No Man's Sky. Let's go to 4K. And I'm assuming that this Aussie down here knows what he's doing, you know, as far as making charts and numbers. He's been busting his ass doing that shit like every fucking day of the week. I don't know how he does it. He's a fucking machine. So I'm taking for granted that he knows what he's doing, and his charts are, to the best of his ability, correct, right? And so far from what I've seen, I think he's pretty fair. You know, he does his due diligence. He does what he can to make sure that all these benchmarks is as close to the accurate representation that they can be. So check this out. No Man's Sky at 4K, 44 to 48 frames per second. Oh wait, 40 to 44 from that Vega to the 1080 Ti. What's going to happen when you overclock both these cards? You're going to get 5 to 10% on this, and you're going to get 15 to 20% on this. All of a sudden, this looks a lot better than you think. I think. Let's try it. Let's see. I know this is dumb. I just enjoy doing it, man. 48%. Okay, so we're at 48 frames per second on the Vega 64. Let's do that for the 44 times 1.1. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt. 48.4. So it really closed the gap. Like, it's close, right? Because you got to assume you're going to get 10% if you put a water block, or at least you would hope to, right? Now, that's not necessarily true, because if this here is not an FE edition, it's already clocked up higher, which means that they could be losing 2 to 4 frames per second off the get-go just by having a Founders Edition, because the boost clock isn't going to be as high, right? So it really is dependent on what that is. And look, Vega 64, yeah, you lose some performance there, which is funny because some of the other ones you don't, but this one you do. Probably because it's working the card really hard, and the liquid cooled has a higher TDP, higher power limit. And yeah, so if you get a Vega 64, either hopefully the Sapphire will allow you to do more power target, you know, out of the box, or you'd have to flash it to the liquid cooled BIOS so you get the extra power limit. And let me tell you, if you get an extra 25% out of this Vega 64 because you had the extra power, it's going to be noticeable, you know, especially for game. It's also going to use a lot of power. Well, let's get to that. Let's enough of this here looking at games that are optimized for NVIDIA, because that's pretty much what all games are. I don't know if they have. Not even sure. Wait. Yeah, this was supposed to be an AMD title. Of course, they are using TSAA or TSSAA, and like I said, AMD does not do anti-aliasing nearly as efficiently as NVIDIA. Now, does that mean the quality's the same? Probably not. You know, I don't know. My guess is you don't get something for nothing, right? So, but does it really matter as long as it looks good enough? I guess that's up to you. If it looks good enough, it doesn't fucking matter. So if you can't tell the difference, then it totally makes sense to go for NVIDIA. Even if they are cheating, it doesn't matter. It's still more performance, right? Okay, so there's the overclocked results. That's cool. Let's get into the, what is this? This is overclocking right here. So before we get into that, I wanted to look at the power. Total system power, not overclocked, 498 versus 511 on the Vega 64 Liquid. Look at that. This thing pulls more juice than Vega 64 does. The liquid cooled obviously has more thermal, you know. And mind you that the Vega 64 liquid cooled uses way more voltage than what it needs for its current clock. You can definitely drop considerable amount of power with the same performance. That's a known fact. And I talked a little bit about that in the previous video. Okay, so I mean, this is to be expected. The die is massive. Let's take a look here. What do we have? 486 millimeters squared versus, I'm going to move this for now, versus the 2080 Ti at 754 millimeters squared. Holy shit balls. That's a big die. Big. Now it is using a superior node. This is GlobalFoundries 14 nanometer, and this is TSMC's 12 nanometer. So the 12 nanometer from TSMC is going to be better than the GlobalFoundries by far. So, mind you, that AMD is going to have TSMC 7 nanometer next gen. So if they release that for us gaming cards, it's going to be killer. Like, it really is going to be killer. It's going to be the 290X all over again. Guaranteed. Is it going to beat the NVIDIA cards this current gen? My guess is yes. Is it going to... It just depends on when it gets released, right? Because if they wait too long, NVIDIA is going to roll out the next card. But I would assume that both companies are in agreement that we want to stagger our launches. We don't want to suck up all the money at once, because if we stagger our launches, then the people with the big dollars or the big paying jobs are going to be able to save up and buy both of our cards rather than just one of us getting the sale, right? So they stagger their launches on purpose. It's not just by chance. These people are smart. They are absolutely market analysts and 100% interested in taking your money. They are not interested in making the games better. Don't matter if it's AMD or NVIDIA. AMD has a little bit more open source, outlook on things, and a little bit less ingredia, you might say. But at the end of the day, they have to make money, and so they're gonna stagger their launch to make sure that they get the most money that they can. People like to have new toys to play with, and if you don't give them anything for a year, they get antsy. So they roll it out every year if they can, provided fabs, and that's probably why NVIDIA went ahead with this 12 nanometer. Even though they know it's not that great, doesn't matter. They can make money. So, with that said, let's go back. And let's look at this here. We want to go back a little bit. Overclock results. Let's take the calculator and let's just kind of go through it real quick. Wherever I can put this. I have a 1080 FE OC. Well, let's take ours, the Vega first, mine. And let's take the lower number first, right? and you take that divided by the large number. So we're getting 15%, 14% overclock on the memory, right? Let's take the 7,000 divided by the 7650, and you're getting 8.5% overclock. Almost double the overclock, not quite. Almost double the overclock out of the AMD card for the memory. Not really stellar for NVIDIA. However, there's some things to consider. You're starting out with 616. So let's do this. It's 91.5, just to make sure. I know it's 8.5, but let's do 100 minus the 91.5. I know it's 8.5. So let's take the 616 and take that times 0.085. 52.3. So there you go. 600 and almost 670 gigs per second. Imagine how much better that would have been if it was 750, which is what it would have been if this was a 500 or a 382-bit bus. It would have been close to the 750 mark or above probably. So if it was a 512-bit bus, man, it'd been over a terabyte a second. Over. And this card would just be a monster. I mean, your power efficiency wouldn't be quite as good, right? It wouldn't look as good on paper. Which, everybody likes their power efficiency, but obviously they don't care that much because they sold out of the 2080 Ti's, and these things are fucking power-hungry hogs. That 250 is a load of bullshit. You can't tell me that you're getting about the same clock speed as the 16 nanometer, right? This 12 nanometer and 16 nanometer is almost nothing. Like, the power difference between the two is so little. So double the size, you know, a quarter more CUDA cores, a bunch more TMUs, and a very small reduction in clock speed. And this GDR6 is no more efficient than the GDR5X, I'm sure. It's very similar. Yep. This thing's going to eat power for breakfast. It will. It's, and you know, from what I've seen, they don't allow you to have any overclock headroom either. We didn't finish doing that. Where'd my calculator go? Oh, okay. Well, I closed that one. Let's do another one here. So, what do we get for average? Peak doesn't matter. We need average. So we'll take the lower number, the 1755, times, divided by the higher number, 1940. And there you go. About 10%, 9%, 9.5%. Okay. Let's take 1592 divided by 1685. Well, nah, I was realistically whatever. It's even less. What's really impressive is how much of a performance gain I got out of that. I got a 17.8 performance gain out of that. How does that make any sense? That's only an 8% uplift to clocks. Interesting. But the actual performance was 17.8. God damn. That's crazy. And I mean, not every benchmark is going to be the same, and not every game is going to perform that 18 to 20%. It's just not. But if they're memory limited, it goes to show you that the memory performance overclocking seems to help considerably. And I suppose that just depends on the benchmark. Not every game or not everything is going to be the same. Oh, what am I doing? I don't want to play that. We're going to skip. And then we get to the price. Okay, this is their performance difference. So you only gain 5% in Arma. Project Car is only 19%. Hitman 24%. Warhammer 24%. A lot of bad ones. The 2080 just doesn't perform that well. But look at Wolfenstein, man, 55%. And this is without any of the extra technology, right? So and okay, that's your 2080 versus the 1080 Ti. Doesn't look very good for that one, considering that the 2080 is actually more expensive than the 1080, which is obviously by design. They're pricing basically what they're doing by raising the price of the new series is they're allowing them to clear inventory of the old series without losing any money on them, right? They're still going to make their full dollar amount on a 1.5 year old tech or 2-year-old tech. That's kind of sad. And, you know, people have to buy fucking stuff. I mean, some people actually need video cards. So they're forced to buy some shit that, you know, they probably shouldn't. Not a fan of the market right now, and I'm not a fan of the people that buy this stuff right now. I mean, if you can hold out, man, you should do it. Your wallet speaks, man. Every penny you spend, they keep track of that shit. So if you stop spending, as a whole, as a community, as people of, you know, the world, if you stop spending with your wallet, trust me, they know, and those prices will move instantaneous because they ain't fucking around. They need to have that steady flow of income. Doesn't matter how much profit margin they have. If they can take more, they will. It doesn't matter. They have to have that money to survive. If you start constricting that money from them, they're gonna drop prices like nobody's fucking business, and they're gonna make sure that money keeps streaming in. If you buy when they raise the price, then they're just gonna keep on raising it. This is case in point. They can and they will. So remember that next time you buy something. Don't buy it if the price doesn't fit your needs. Because there's 100 million other people out there just like you feeling the exact same way. They're feeling the pinch too. When their wallet opens up and they drop $1,200 on a little GPU, trust me, very few people can just throw $1,200 at a goddamn computer part and think nothing of it. Like, even if they can think nothing of it, they still do. You see what I'm saying? Like, even if they can easily afford it, they still do. They still think, man, what a waste of fucking money. What could I have got for $1,200? Shit, I could have gone to the Bahamas. I could have gone, you know, like, that's an actual vacation for $1,200. Like, you could buy a lot of things for $1,200. Let's be honest. And get a new pair of cylinder heads for my Camaro if I wanted to for $1,200. You know? Jesus. The amount of money that people are willing to... Like, to me, the Vega 64 at $500 feels expensive. Like, I have the money, but it just feels expensive. It really does. And it's not a bad performance. Like, look here. Vega 64, $500, $9.8 per frame or whatever. Cost per frame. Jesus, that's fucking expensive. You know, but look at the 1070. Look at the Vega 56. At $400, and you can get them now for $400. What a steal of a card. Make no mistake, the Vega 56 is going to trounce that fucking 1070 a couple years down the road. It's going to absolutely destroy it because this thing is so memory bottlenecked, it's not even funny. And this baby will overclock probably just as good as the Vega 64, provided you can get the power limit out of it. Man. But look at that. And that's the 1000. Let's look at the 1200. It's coming. Bam. Now you're up into liquid cooled territory with an air cooler. Yikes. The scary part is that people are willing to spend that kind of money per frame. I mean, granted, it's 4K frames. So you could take that number and divide it by 4 for 1080p. You know, if you look at it that way. But then, there again, you don't need any more than a 1070 for 1080p or a Vega 56. That's plenty. Plenty. Trust me. Plenty. I mean, I know a lot of people that are running 1060s, which is like a 290X. They're running 1060s today. That's like a 290X from 2014. 4 years ago, you could have had that performance. And the sad thing is, they want $300 for a 1060. You know, if my memory serves, the 290X was only like $400 brand new back in 2014. Yeah, I mean, talk about a great bang for your buck. And it overclocked like 20-some% versus the 1060 is going to do like, what, 5%? 10% maybe? Oof. Less on the memory. And the memory is the bottleneck. Just like CPUs. GPUs are exact same way. The memory is the goddamn bottleneck. You got to get the data to the core or it ain't going to work. Oof. Rough times. Rough time. And I think that's part of the reason that memory prices are so high is not only because people are buying, enterprises are buying SSDs that are, terabytes and terabytes in size for $20,000 a crack. That's only part of it. The other part is we need the memory performance. We absolutely, everything we own needs the memory performance. The CPUs are fast enough. Like, they really are. The software needs to be updated to take advantage of the CPUs, but man, even on the CPUs themselves, it's still memory limitations. Like the cache is the bottleneck. Not, I mean, I'm not going to get into it, but even the 2080, man, look at that. And they did that on purpose because they want to sell these. And these are actually cheaper than that. I think, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if they're cheaper than that or not, but still a good deal. If you really have to have a GPU, Vega 56, 1080, 1080 Ti, Vega 64, they're all good cards. For anybody in the normal realm of 1440p or 1080p, that's going to be your go-to, man. The only game that I can really see that the 20 series is really going to be beneficial to is something on the lines of Ark Survival Evolved. That game eats GPU power for breakfast. And NVIDIA squashed the bug on DirectX 12 for them, so they couldn't do it even if they wanted to. And they all but came out and said NVIDIA didn't let us. I mean, all the signs were there, right? All of a sudden, they just dropped support, even though they had it scheduled for launch. It was all ready. It was all done. NVIDIA said, oh, no. We're paying you, and you can't give the opposition a better performing game than us. Well, no, we don't allow that. So it is what it is. That's how the industry is right now. NVIDIA wins, and we pay the price for it. The consumer pays the price for NVIDIA winning, okay? But if that's the game that you play, and you have, the potential to put thousands of hours into it, dude, by all means, go out and buy yourself a 2080 Ti and enjoy it, because it's going to kill that game. It's going to destroy it, especially with the DS or the Deep Learning SS, right? Like, it's just going to be fucking killer. I almost want to buy one just to play it, just to see what it's like, because it's going to be that big of a jump in performance. It really is. But I have to remind myself that 7 nanometer is coming, and don't worry, the 7 nanometer cards are going to be good too. Like it's hard. It's hard to remember that, hey, I don't have to buy it today. I can buy it tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And I think that about sums it up here. I don't think there's much else that we need to go over. Bunch of him yapping about his cards and how big. Anybody that thinks this card isn't power hungry, take a look at this beast. Look at the fucking size difference. Look at the size difference of those cards. That's a big card to begin with. Look at the size. And that's a 3-slot cooler too. Like, you know what's something that's always baffled me? Is why the fuck can't they just make a 3-slot turbo style cooler? You know, the blower style card in a 3-slot card. Why don't they do that? I don't want 300, 400, 500 watts of heat inside my case. No, that's going to heat up my RAM, my CPU, everything. The motherboard. Dude, all that heat's going to get blown right into the side of your fucking motherboard. I mean, seriously. Look at your Southbridge. If you have SLI, your Southbridge is going to be cooked. Just by the video cards. Not even considering the heat that the Southbridge makes. That Southbridge would be running at 90C. Man, how does that affect your data? You know? All your hard drive, all your storage is going through that. Oof. No thanks. I'll take a blower card any day over an open. I mean, don't get me wrong. Open coolers are great if that's what you need, then do it. But I would much rather a better designed blower cooler than an open air design. Okay? That's all I'm saying. I would much rather have a better designed, you know, like, who cares if it's 3 slots if you only need 1 GPU? Not everybody cares to use all their expansion slots. Now, I'm not saying that every single card has to be a triple slot solution, right? Get that. But this triple slot solution can't be the full triple slot because it has to have room for the air to get from the fans. The fans have to have room to get air. So if you have 2 things in there, they have to have some room. So it's actually only 2.5. If you had a blower style card, it can be much thicker. It can be straight up the full 3 slots. And obviously you probably wouldn't use that in Crossfire or SLI either, because you would still want to have a gap between the 2 cards and you probably couldn't. So that's fine. I'm okay with that. You put a triple slot cooler on it, and if you want to fucking SLI it or Crossfire it, then you need to pony up and put the water block on. You know, that's all there is to it, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. Oh, let's see here. He didn't show me how many power pins that had, but yeah. So I guess that about sums it up. Pretty exciting stuff if you have a game that you really are looking forward to playing. At least we have an option to buy something, even if it is ridiculously priced. I'm gonna fight the urge to buy this. I did not buy the 1080 Ti because I really didn't like the gimped fucking memory bus. I certainly don't like the GIMP memory bus on this one either, but I mean, it's got some compelling arguments to buy it. Okay? Like it's gonna perform well out of the box. It's also going to I don't care for the non-blower design, but whatever. I mean, I'll throw a water block on it, it'll be fine. Yeah, and those fans aren't easy to clean either, by the way. So if you want to have it for a few years and you have a little bit sticky of a dust problem, yeah, it's not going to work out well for you. Gamers Nexus did a teardown, and it was not good. Something like 80 screws to pull off the heatsink and fans. Yeah, a lot. So deep learning super sampling, DLSS. That is what makes this card great. Because if you can run a higher resolution but render it at 1080p, if you can render it at 1080p and see it at 4K with no performance cost, essentially, wow, dude. That's, I mean, it's not no performance cost, right? It still has to do work. The memory still has to be accessed. And there again, we have a gimped memory bus. Now, how much that memory has to be accessed, I don't know. Not a lot, probably. Most of it gets done in cache. Probably not a big deal, but Jesus. Realistically, you can probably see a 50% boost to performance. Realistically. Just from that technology alone. So if you have a game that uses it, it's going to be great. You know? And that makes it worth a little bit more money. Provided the game you play supports it. which I think a lot of games will. So for a lot of people, I can see the appeal to this generation of cards. But the value still isn't there because you're still only getting 11 gigs or 8 gigs for that matter. And you're getting a cut down bus, 256 or 352. 256 is actually a round number, so it's not necessarily a total cut down bus, but you get what I'm saying. It's limited memory bandwidth versus the previous gen. And trust me, that actually matters. Even if it, and look, you are getting a few less ropes too. And a few less TMUs, which is interesting that it does have some architectural improvements then. Well, it's got the memory speed. No, it doesn't. So it's got to have that L2 cache speed. It's got to be helping it out. Or a bigger L2 cache at least. I was just looking at it, you know, trying to figure out the clock speed and things. It does have... Oh, okay, it's got a little higher clock. I don't know. To me, it straight up looks like the only thing they did to these cards is give them more memory bandwidth. And a little more clock speed per TMU, right? That's how you get the performance bump over this, because the clock speed is the same. Or very close. I wonder if that star doesn't indicate a higher... Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know. I don't know what this 30 watts is all about. But at any rate, it looks to me like all they really did is perhaps give it a little more L2 cache, and they added a bunch of extra deep learning. They added some RTX core. I don't really think the RTX core is very big on this chip. I think it's a very, very, very light-ended, and I think most of it went to the deep learning performance. I don't know. And even if, you know, what they show is that a third of the die or a quarter of the die went to deep learning and a quarter of the die went to RTX. But from what I've researched, to me, it doesn't look like that's probably the case. The ray tracing that they have done was also done by the company that invented it a few years back with a much, 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 much weaker card. Like, we're talking like a Android device type of card doing what was it, 6 or 8 gig arrays, something like that. So yeah, my guess is more of the die space went to deep learning and to maybe a little bit larger cache. And yeah, and the larger cache is to help simulate, you know, more memory bandwidth, which they're not going to give you. So it's only going to go so far before you need the memory bandwidth. Same thing with color compression. It's only going to go so far, because if a game doesn't have the proper color compression, guess what? Oof. Oof, that's right. Okay, I think I'm long-winded enough. I probably talked for well over an hour. Well, it's an hour and 3 minutes, so if you haven't fallen asleep by now, tune in next time. All right, well, thanks for listening to me ramble. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion. I don't really know any more than anybody else out there, so don't trash on me too hard, okay? All right, thanks, guys. See you later.